So hello and welcome to this week's episode on the Resto Saga Classic Car Restoration YouTube channel. And this week we're looking at the 1969 MGB GT. And the reason we're looking at it is it's this car's 50th birthday. Now, I call it the 1969 MGB GT because it was built in late 1969, but it was actually registered on the road here in Northern Ireland on the 1st of January 1970. So this being New Year's Day, when this video was shot, this is its 50th birthday, 2020, 1970, 50 years, which I think it's looking pretty good for 50 years old. So I'm going to move the car outside and we're going to do a little walk around and talk a bit about this car and its history, what I've done to it since I bought it a couple of years ago and what my plans are for it in the future. So let's move it outside and see what we can get up to. So this particular MGB GT, as I said, was built in the late 1969. It was brought to Northern Ireland where it was registered on a County Tyrone plate. The VZ shows County Tyrone. Its first owner was down in Dromore, which is in County Down. Certainly that's the first owner I can see off the tax book. I have the original tax book for this and there have been a number of owners and I've been able to trace most of them. It then moved around Northern Ireland, going up to the north of the province, moving across the northwest, and then eventually making its way to me. And I've actually been in touch with some of the previous owners, which is also very cool to find out what they did to it and what the condition the car had been in before they got it. I've also got a big history file, probably about that thick, full of old receipts, which I think is great. Whenever you buy any old car, you can see what has been done to it down through the years. I bought this car approximately 3 years ago. It'll be 3 years of my ownership in March. It had been fully restored by the owner just prior to me. He did a home restoration on it. He painted it in red. Well, he painted it red. It's not quite the right tone of red. It is tartan red, and I know there's lots of different tartan reds, but if you look up underneath the dashboard, you'll see that the shade is quite different to what's on the outside, but that's okay. I think it's very presentable. You've seen previous videos on this car as to the work I do to keep it up to scratch as well. Little summary, the MGB GT is a 2+2, well that's what I call it anyway. You need to be very small to use the two back seats, but the two front seats are fairly generous. It has a 1.8 litre 4-cylinder engine in the front. This particular car has a 4-speed gearbox. Some of the earlier ones had 3. And this car does not have overdrive, although that was optional and then later became standard. In terms of suspension, it has leaf springs at the back and coil springs at the front with wishbones, lever arm dampers both ends. All very usable, easily maintained, and a great classic car. Probably your quintessential British GT for the everyman. I know there's Aston Martins and so on, but I would imagine most of us can more likely to afford an MG. This particular car is on the wire wheels, which I think look brilliant. It's hard to beat a MG on wire wheels, although the later Ross styles when they're done up also look really good. Chrome bumpers front and rear, although mine are painted silver as per a previous owner. Don't really know why, but something will get changed sooner or later. Chrome grille, and this has the interesting little bonnet finisher. Yes, it's a bonnet, it's a British car, which I believe is quite rare. Also has an aluminium bonnet as standard. So all very smart. I think it's really aged quite well for 50 years. Obviously I can't give you too much of the history because I'm trying to respect people's privacy, but I think it's great. So let's have a talk about what I've done to this car in the 3 years that I have owned it and what my plans are for the future. Starting inside then, the biggest change I feel visually is the steering wheel. Whenever I bought this car, it had a hideous brown leather and gold steering wheel, which is very much aftermarket, although it was actually a good make. So it was being sold on plus its boss for a little profit, and it covered the cost of buying this correct 3-spoke steering wheel. Also put the proper gear knob on in the middle, which also improved visually. You've heard me talk about these vinyl seats before. They are the next job, you will be glad to hear. As you can see, this one's quite collapsed, so the plan is to put a new diaphragm and foam in it. Same with this side, I know the seat covers don't match, but that's part of the character of the car and it doesn't really bother me too much. I'm going to take the carpets out, clean them and put new soundproofing underneath. The headlining was sagging since I bought it, so I eventually lost my temper with it and just pulled it out. This is the original underneath, which isn't too bad. I know there's some little marks and scuffs on it, but I think for the age of the car it's quite respectable. A bit more cleaning to be done on it, and I think it could be really quite usable. Also going to pull the covers off the sun visors and see what original lies under there. So lots of work to be done. It is a rolling restoration, as you'll see all the various installments even on the YouTube channel here, but lots to be done, lots to do, but I have done plenty. And I just keep it presentable but also usable, because it's nice to take out if you're going out for dinner or going out for a run on a nice day. And my son loves it when I get his baby seat in the passenger seat beside me. He loves to go out in it too. Underneath the bonnet then, there's a huge amount of mechanical work done to this. Some videos were made on it, although they were brief, and they're back before I really threw my back into the YouTube channel. I pulled the engine out of this, mainly because it was really down in power, and my friend who's a mechanic did a little compression test for me, and the compression was very poor on the majority of the cylinders really. So we pulled the engine out, left the gearbox in situ, we stripped the head off. The bottom end seemed to be okay, so that was left. We bought a brand new cylinder head, mainly because the original was found to have a crack in it when I took it to the engine rebuilders. So we bought a brand new Ivor Searle head, which came with a year or 100,000 miles guarantee on it. Now, it's now passed, but it's still going perfectly well. The engine runs like a dream, so much more power compared to what it used to. It also has hardened valve seats, which are fitted for unleaded. I put new fuel lines in, a new starter motor buried down there underneath the distributor. I also put electronic ignition in the distributor, and I've put a new spin-on oil filter conversion on as well to reduce drain back whenever the car sits for a while. It is a classic car. Unfortunately, I don't get to use it every day, so I want to protect it. Alternator's fine, just got a bit of a tidy up, painted the fan, cleaned out the radiator, painted it, and put a brand new oil cooler in as well, because the old one was probably original and likely full of crud, and new plumbing in there for as well. The centerpiece of any MGB engine bay is the heater. I pulled this heater apart, fixed it all up, restored it, and it works beautifully, and you can check out that mini series on the channel here, and I think you'll agree it looks really well. Let's have a wee look around the outside then. More money spent was a Christmas present from my parents, where I got the four wheels taken off, the tires stripped off them, and they were sandblasted and then powder coated. Powder coat, rather than going for the original sort of grey silver, I went for this powder coat chrome. Now, it's been out in the road and there's a lot of gubbins around here. I went for this powder coat chrome, and I think it looks fantastic. Really sets the car off, and when it's all nicely cleaned up, it looks brilliant. It's very hard to keep a classic car clean in this weather with the salty, mucky, wet, damp roads that we have here in the British winter. New number plates were also bought very quickly after I got the car. I didn't like I suppose they were period correct for probably late 70s, early 80s, but I prefer the black and silver. I think that suits the character of the car a bit better as well. Also traced a faulty reverse lamp and fixed that. In terms of the suspension, last winter I also did another mini series on the rear suspension, which I fully rebuilt with brand new springs, nuts, bolts and polyurethane bushes, which has absolutely transformed the ride. Also put new link bars into the shock absorbers, which took away a very irritating squeak. So the car is lovely, but all it's done now is shown up the front end, so that's definitely on the cards to do as well. So then I hear you ask, what are my plans for the future with this MG? Well, I do plan on keeping it. I really enjoy this. The odd time I take the head stagger that I should sell it and maybe get a classic that I can take my wife and my child out in, but then I take it out for a drive and realise just how good it is and how little I paid for it and how little work it's required to keep it good. I really do think I'd be mad to move it on anytime soon. Little things that annoy me that I like to fix: the front quarter lights, neither of them open. I haven't figured out why, and I don't want to force them to damage any chrome, but that needs fixed. The chrome finishers also need tidied up, but in terms of a full visual tidy up, really the car needs fully resprayed and some little rust areas treated too. The chronic MG problem of the wing joining the scuttle, I don't really look forward to taking this apart. I don't think it's going to be too bad, but you never know until you take it off, and I'm preparing myself for the worst. So some body work needs done, the shell needs tidied up, and ideally it would be repainted in the proper tartan red, which is a bit more dark maroon than this orangey tone. Other things, proper chrome bumpers would be nice, although they're getting more expensive. Front suspension needs rebuilt with polyurethane bushes, probably put new springs in as well. Someone has pointed out that it rides quite high at the back, and I know it does. Originally I put this down to the rear springs not having settled, but their springs are now a year old, and I would have thought they would have settled by now, but I haven't really, so I might put some little lowering blocks in. I did buy the correct springs, I'm not sure why they've settled. It could be that the tires are too low profile, although I would need to look into that. Other thing is the exhaust. It has two silencers and hangs very low in the passenger side. Now with the higher suspension it doesn't catch on speed bumps, but it certainly did before I did the suspension. So I would love to put a stainless steel sports system in front to back, including the manifold, which will remove one of the silencers and also sit a little bit higher up as well. So lots of plans. Front windscreen needs replaced as well, because if you look very carefully down in the corner, oh, it's not going to show up particularly well there in camera, it is delaminating in the corners. Mechanically, the engine's fine, I'm not too worried about it. The gearbox does annoy me sometimes. It's sometimes quite hard to change between first and second, especially when it's cold, although I know that that's not particularly unusual. Ideally, in a perfect world, if I had lots of money, I would put in the Vitesse MX-5 conversion, where you get a 5-speed box, and it will be lovely, and there's a nice close ratio. I don't know how that's going to work financially, so I may just need to look for an overdrive gearbox and keep an eye out for that. I got an overdrive for the Land Rover, it took lots of years, but I think an overdrive in this would really make it perfectly usable. The interior, as I said, needs a bit of a tidy up. The dashboard could get powder coated and the seats fixed as well. As you know, if you've been following this YouTube channel, I like to keep this as a rolling restoration, so I'm going to do as much as I can to keep it on the road. I don't like keeping the cars off the road for too long because it only causes problems, and I don't get to use them as much either. So I'm just going to put the MG back in the shed, we'll do a little summary, and that'll be the end of the video. So there you have it, my 1969 MGB GT. A little celebration of 50 years of this particular car. Obviously the model has been around for longer than that, and there's a particularly long production run, which probably explains why it's such a popular car and a popular classic car. I hope you've enjoyed the video. Please hit the subscribe button down in the bottom corner there. Give me a thumbs up if you've enjoyed this, and also fire me a comment. I reply to them all, I read them all, and any constructive feedback or ideas I'm more than happy to hear, and I'll most likely respond to it too. So thanks very much for watching. I'll catch you all again next week, and I hope you've enjoyed the video. Cheerio now.